Jake Paul's victory over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. marked a pivotal moment in his boxing career, one that sparked widespread discussion across the boxing world. The fight, which saw Paul dominate a former world champion, was a spectacle that left fans, analysts, and fighters alike re-evaluating the YouTuber-turned-boxer. While some praised his performance as a sign of legitimate skill, others questioned the state of boxing and Chavez Jr.'s effort, or lack thereof. The bout was a fascinating clash of narratives: youth versus experience, showmanship versus legacy, and ambition versus decline. This fight, more than any other in Paul's career, shifted the conversation from whether he belongs in the ring to where he might go next. From the opening bell, it was clear that Jake Paul was not in the ring to play games. He moved with purpose, utilizing sharp footwork and a controlled jab to dictate the pace. His energy was relentless, a stark contrast to Chavez Jr., who appeared sluggish and disengaged in the early rounds. Observers noted that Chavez Jr. barely threw punches in the first few rounds, prompting confusion and criticism. Shane Mosley, a former boxing champion, described Chavez Jr.'s performance as weird, questioning what he was doing in the ring. Mosley's commentary echoed the sentiments of many who watched the fight unfold. Chavez Jr., a fighter with a storied name and a history of world-class performances, seemed to be a shadow of his former self, walking forward without mounting any significant offense. Paul, on the other hand, looked every bit the part of a polished fighter. His jab was crisp, his movement deliberate, and his conditioning allowed him to maintain a high pace throughout the fight. Even as he showed signs of fatigue in the later rounds, Paul's ability to stay composed and weather Chavez Jr.'s late surge demonstrated a level of poise that surprised many. Ryan Garcia, a prominent figure in the boxing world, took to social media to praise Paul, stating simply, "Jake did his thing, outboxed Chavez Jr." This sentiment was echoed by others in the sport, including Jose Benavidez Sr., a respected trainer and father of boxer David Benavidez. Benavidez Sr. went so far as to suggest that Paul deserves a shot at a world title, a statement that carried significant weight given his experience with elite-level talent. The boxing community's reaction to the fight was a mix of admiration for Paul's growth and disappointment in Chavez Jr.'s performance. Many felt that Chavez Jr., at 39 years old and with a career marked by personal struggles and long breaks from the ring, was not the same fighter who once held a world title. His lack of activity in the early rounds led to speculation about his strategy. Some, including ringside commentators, theorized that Chavez Jr. was attempting to let Paul tire himself out before mounting a comeback in the later rounds. However, even when Chavez Jr. became more active in the final 3 rounds, landing some powerful shots, it was too little, too late. Paul's dominance in the earlier rounds had already secured him the victory, with many believing he won every round convincingly. The criticism of Chavez Jr. was harsh. Shane Mosley didn't mince words, suggesting that Chavez Jr. should retire. "If you can't throw punches in 2, 3, 4 rounds, you need to retire," Mosley said. He argued that Chavez Jr. was coasting on his father's legendary name rather than bringing the effort required to compete at this level. This sentiment was shared by others who felt that Chavez Jr.'s performance was a disappointment, not just to fans but to his own legacy. The son of one of boxing's greatest icons, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., Chavez Jr. had once been a promising talent, but years of inconsistency and personal issues seemed to have taken their toll. His showing against Paul only amplified calls for him to step away from the sport. Not everyone was impressed with the fight itself. Piers Morgan, a vocal critic of Paul's boxing career, described the bout as an unwatchable farce. Morgan argued that Paul's choice to fight older, past-their-prime opponents like Chavez Jr. was damaging to the sport. He acknowledged Paul's business acumen, noting that he was lining his pockets with buckets of dollars, but maintained that these types of matchups were more about spectacle than competitive boxing. Morgan's comments reflected a broader skepticism among some fans and analysts who still view Paul as more of an entertainer than a legitimate boxer. For them, the fight against Chavez Jr. was just another carefully selected matchup designed to make Paul look good without exposing him to significant risk. Despite the criticism, there were plenty of voices within the boxing world who saw Paul's performance as a turning point. Rayo Valenzuela, a respected young fighter, praised Paul's showing, going so far as to say that he deserves to be ranked among the top 15 to 20 fighters in his division. This was a significant endorsement, as it came from someone within the sport who understands the grind of professional boxing. Valenzuela's comments underscored the growing respect for Paul's technical improvements, particularly his timing, discipline, and in-ring IQ. Boxing commentator Showbiz The Adult echoed this sentiment, arguing that Paul's growth is undeniable. "He messed around and got good," Showbiz said, emphasizing that Paul's skills have developed far beyond what many expected when he first stepped into the ring. Paul's preparation for the fight was a key factor in his success. Unlike some of his earlier bouts, where his showmanship and promotional antics often overshadowed his training, Paul approached this fight with a level of seriousness that caught the attention of those in his camp. Sources close to Paul confirmed that he cut out distractions and focused intensely on his training, working with elite trainers and utilizing top-tier resources like hyperbaric chambers and sports scientists. Tony Jeff, a boxing insider, praised Paul's commitment, noting that his ability to surround himself with the best team money can gave him a significant advantage. Jeff pointed out that Paul's recovery and training regimen allowed him to progress at a faster rate than the average boxer, a fact that was evident in his performance against Chavez Jr. The fight itself was a study in contrasts. Paul, at 28 years old, brought youth, energy, and hunger to the ring. Chavez Jr., at 39, carried the weight of a long career and personal challenges that seemed to sap his drive. Paul's cruiserweight frame gave him a physical edge, as Chavez Jr. had spent much of his career at middleweight and was not accustomed to facing opponents with Paul's size and power. While Chavez Jr.'s experience was undeniable, with over 60 professional fights and a former world title to his name, it wasn't enough to counter Paul's relentless pace and strategic approach. The age gap and difference in conditioning were glaring, and Paul capitalized on every advantage. At the post-fight press conference, Paul was both gracious and defiant. He gave respect to Chavez Jr., acknowledging his toughness and the Mexican warrior style that made him a formidable opponent in the later rounds. However, Paul also took aim at his critics, particularly those who had doubted his durability and boxing ability. "People underestimate my chin and my toughness," he said, pointing out that he had absorbed Chavez Jr.'s late punches without faltering. Paul's confidence was palpable as he addressed the media, emphasizing that his actions in the ring spoke louder than the skepticism of pundits like Piers Morgan. He also hinted at bigger challenges ahead, mentioning names like Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua, though he acknowledged the need for more time to take on such high-profile opponents. The fight's outcome sparked a broader conversation about Paul's place in boxing. For years, he had been dismissed as a YouTuber dabbling in a sport that demands years of dedication. His early fights against fellow internet personalities and retired athletes only fueled this perception. However, his victory over Chavez Jr., a former world champion, forced even his harshest critics to reconsider their stance. While some, like Morgan, continued to question the legitimacy of his opponents, others saw the fight as proof that Paul is more than a sideshow. His ability to outbox a seasoned professional, even one past his prime, demonstrated a level of skill and commitment that can't be ignored. For Chavez Jr., the fight raised difficult questions about his future. Many in the boxing world, including Mosley and Valenzuela, suggested that retirement might be the best path forward. Chavez Jr.'s lackluster performance, coupled with his history of personal struggles, painted a picture of a fighter who may no longer have the drive or physical ability to compete at a high level. However, others, like Valenzuela, left the door open for Chavez Jr. to continue, suggesting he could take on another fight against a less challenging opponent, perhaps even another YouTuber. The consensus, though, was that Chavez Jr.'s days as a serious contender are likely over. Paul, meanwhile, emerged from the fight with a renewed sense of purpose. His victory was not just about defeating Chavez Jr., but about proving that he belongs in the sport. He spoke passionately about his desire to build a legacy, not just as a celebrity boxer but as a legitimate competitor. His performance against Chavez Jr. backed up his words, showing that he has the skills to compete with experienced fighters. The question now is where Paul goes from here. A world title shot, as suggested by Benavidez Sr. and others, is no longer a far-fetched idea. While names like Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua may still be out of reach, Paul's trajectory suggests that he's closing the gap. The fight also highlighted the unique advantages Paul brings to the sport. His wealth and resources allow him to train like an elite athlete, with access to the best trainers, nutritionists, and recovery tools. As Tony Jeff noted, this gives Paul an edge that most boxers can only dream of. His ability to recover faster and train harder has accelerated his development, allowing him to go from a novice to a legitimate contender in just a few years. While some may argue that this gives him an unfair advantage, others see it as a testament to his commitment to the sport. In the end, Jake Paul's victory over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was more than just a win. It was a statement. It showed that Paul is no longer just a celebrity dabbling in boxing but a fighter with real potential. For Chavez Jr., it was a sobering reminder of how far he has fallen from his prime. The boxing world is now left to grapple with the reality that Paul is here to stay, and his next moves will be watched closely. Whether he pursues a world title or continues to take on high-profile opponents, one thing is clear: Jake Paul is no longer a sideshow. He's a contender, and he's ready to prove it again.